It is my pleasure to welcome you today for our webinar. I am welcoming you on behalf of the Vincentian Center for Church and Society, which is led by Father Griffin, and our St. John's CRS Global Campus Committee, which Dana Livingston and myself co-chair. We're really excited for today, and it is our first time doing this with Zoom and not WebEx. So if anyone has any questions for the speaker, put them in the chat, and when it comes time for that after the student responders, I will raise them. But everyone should have who is not part of the panel, should have their cameras muted, and make sure you yourselves are muted. We begin and always by calling ourselves together to make time to focus on questions of justice, equity, poverty, as we do in all of our events here as part of the CRS Global Campus. We always begin with prayer. And so I begin our time today with a prayer for solidarity. This one I got from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops by looking at things on the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. Almighty and ever-living God, empower your one human family to join hands on our journey of faith and justice. Send us your spirit of hope, that we may work to alleviate human suffering and foster charity and justice in our world. Amen. We are profoundly lucky to have with us today our St. Vincent de Paul Medal recipient from this year's Vincentian convocation, Mr. Ralph McCloud. It has been a privilege for me to have gotten to know Mr. McCloud over many years now, through his work at the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. And I must say, I've been learning from him on how to engage in advocacy and accompaniment since he asked if I would sit down at an empty chair at breakfast at a conference celebrating I guess it would have been the 40th anniversary of the Catholic Campaign for Human Development at the University of Notre Dame. And I was a brand new PhD, just trying to learn more about how theology could come together with these issues on the ground and be more engaged. And so it's really nice to have the privilege to be able to welcome Ralph to speak with our university community and our students. Ralph is a senior fellow at Network, the Catholic Social Justice Lobby, who many of you are probably most familiar are the people behind the Nuns on the Bus. It was founded by Catholic sisters in 1972 in the spirit of the Second Vatican Council. It is an inclusive national Catholic advocacy organization open to all with shared values working to achieve equity and justice for all. He is also the former director of the Catholic Campaign for Human Development at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, which is the official anti-poverty program of the U.S. Church. Prior to his time leading CCHD, Mr. McCloud worked as the Division Director of Pastoral and Community Services in the Diocese of Fort Worth in Texas, has served as the President of the National Association of Black Catholic Administrators, and as a board member for the National Black Catholic Congress, the Roundtable Association of Social Action Directors, and the Center for Migration Services here in New York. He is the current chair of the Catholic Mobilizing Network. From 1997 to 2005, while in Fort Worth, he also served 4 terms on the City Council and 3 terms as mayor pro tempore. He has chaired the County Homelessness Commission and was named Tarrant County's first Racial Reconciliation Award winner by the Tarrant County Community of Churches. We are lucky to have him with us today to share his experience and wisdom and advice on addressing poverty through advocacy and accompaniment. And I can think of no better person to share this with us and to instruct and educate and empower us than Ralph McCloud. And so I turn it over to you and invite you to give your presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clark. I've long stood in amazement and honor in watching your tremendous work over the years and your commitment to justice through academia and other ways. So thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be invited. It's also a pleasure for me to be with you this afternoon, as I am I I relish the opportunity to have a conversation with the folks at St. John, but particularly young people, because I realize first and foremost that anytime there's been any kind of significant change in the history of the world, it's actually happened in the hands of people, your age, or maybe even slightly older. It doesn't matter whether it was in South America, South Africa, the southern part of this country, Southern Korea. Young people who have been idealistic, who have been courageous, who have been bold, have changed the course of history in a very, very positive way. So I'm honored to be able to be with you this afternoon and to have this conversation. And I hope that it is a conversation. I hope that what we say and do here extends beyond what we say and do here today, that somehow or the other we're able to keep in touch with one another, because I am just as interested in your insights and your thoughts and gleaning from your tremendous courage and your tremendous vision of what the world can be for me personally. So let's hold that opportunity open, and we can talk beyond today, one way or the other, through emails or any of the kinds of social media ways that we can continue conversations. Please know that I'm open to it, and I look forward to it. A little bit about my perspective. Dr. Clark mentioned that I worked for the Catholic Campaign for Human Development for around 17 years. And what that is, that's the bishop's anti-poverty campaign. And lest it not be confused with a charity effort. It's an anti-poverty campaign that works to support community organizing and economic development in ways that's not charity. It identifies and recognizes that low income people have voice and have agency, and we look for ways we might be able to listen to them. The economic development arm supported things like worker-owned co-ops, job training centers, community land trusts, some credit unions. But the overwhelming majority of what we supported was community organizing. And community organizing is, for whatever the reasons, it's gotten a bad name over the years. But it was something that the bishop saw as being extremely complimentary for our wonderful charitable works in our schools, in our hospitals, our homeless shelters, our food kids. I mean, we did tremendous work in the St. Vincent de Paul Society, tremendous work there, but something was still missing. And that thing that was missing, that folks were feeling that they weren't being part of the decision making that affected their lives and the lives of their families and the lives of their communities. So they said, we're going to support community organizing. What is community organizing group might look like? It might look like a group of churches or organizations or mosques or synagogues coming together and trying to improve the plight of the people that are there. Not necessarily folks who are members, because many of the organizing and community organizing that we supported didn't necessarily, weren't always Catholic, but they always had a bit of a Catholic core. It was faith-based community organizing because there was an appreciation for the faith of all of the folks who were members of the organizations. The important thing, I think, in our community organizing, our faith-based community organizing, that we insisted that the board members, the persons who are making the decisions for the organization, they had to be low income for themselves. They had to prove that they were low income. So we did not have persons who were coming and telling low income people what they needed to do or how to pull themselves up out of poverty. Rather, we were intentional and deliberate about listening to the voices of the persons who are in poverty. So the majority of our, as I mentioned, was community organizing. I would say somewhere around 80%. And it was all about, at the core, community organizing is all about advocacy and accompaniment and proximity. It realizes the importance of getting out of silos, no matter how they are, whether they're neighborhood silos, whether community silos, whether the silos of organizations or churches, going outside of ourselves and being, as Pope Francis invited and continues to invite us to be persons who smell like the sheep, to be that field hospital, to go across the what I call the proverbial railroad tracks and be with folks. And then we have a shared humanity, recognize the shared humanity with one another. And that we realize and have an appreciation that encourages us to listen, to walk with, to encounter, and be brothers and sisters in much deeper ways. Going to the peripheries, going to the margins, being that field hospital. And when we get there, when we get to that field hospital, we get to spending some deliberate, intentional time listening, deliberate listening to what folks are saying. And I think in that listening, what I've experienced over the years is that in that listening, there's an appreciation for the some of the same hopes, dreams, and desires of the low income people that we were walking with were the same hopes, dreams, and desires that I had. So I was able to acknowledge a shared humanity, and the folk who were able to participate in community organizing, they too understood in a way. But it's not something that happens accidentally. It doesn't happen naturally. It has to be intentional. It has to be deliberate. I think the one of the big components of the community organizing was what we would call leadership development, where we would encourage low-income people to, as they were telling their stories, and teach them ways they might be able to access systems, be they government systems, be they business systems, be they other kind of systems, educational systems that were actually not meeting the needs of their communities. How they might be able to access them and give them a degree of I want to say give them a degree of courage that they didn't have going in. It's not that we were empowering them because the folks already had the power. I mean, the folks had the power because of no other reason that they were made. They were made in the image and likeness of God, and they had a power and a dignity that was associated with that we could only we couldn't enhance or build upon. It was already there. But having an opportunity to listen to folks, have an opportunity to provide them with the kind of tools so that let them know how to approach city council members or school board members or businesses or persons to claim that was really theirs. So we had several different situations. I'm going to share a couple of stories, but I think the best way I like to describe the whole importance of community organizing and advocacy and accompaniment is that we all heard the proverb about teaching a person to fish. You know, I think with community organizing, we would teach entire communities how to fish. So it wasn't a one-time effort or incident. It was something that the entire community learned, and the entire community taught their descendants how to fish. And the whole essence of the learning is something that they could use over and over and over again and build upon their communities. So it was beyond just teaching a person to fish. It was teaching the community to fish. It was teaching the generations that followed to fish. It was teaching folks the importance of not just independence but interdependence and building community. So a typical group, like I said, might be a group of churches, might be a group of neighborhood organizations. It might be people who are intense with faith, might be Catholic bishops, and it might be people with no faith at all, who are coming together, who identified a problem in their community that is keeping folks in poverty, and realize the important fact that individually they can't do a whole lot to solve it. But when they come together as community, they have a great deal of power in community. And one of the mantras of community organizing is organizing money and organizing people. Community organizing just by its very nature doesn't have a whole lot of money. But when you organize people, you are able to make some powerful changes. So then, and in that just by definition means that you're not doing this alone, that you're not working alone. A couple of stories that come to mind, and I have to admit, there's probably hundreds of stories in my time that could come up, but that's a couple of them kind of stick out. One was a 17-year-old girl who was in Southern California in high school, and she realized that as she was getting ready to graduate, that even though she had made all A's in her entire time in high school, and even though she was an extraordinary scholar, that the expectations of the high school that she was in, the curriculum of the high school where she was in, could only afford her an opportunity to go to a junior college. She couldn't go to a 4-year college because of the expectations of the low expectations of the folk who were there. So the curriculum that was there at the high school would not prepare her for anything other than a junior college. But she came together and started talking to folks and came together. We did some supported some of her efforts, and people came together across the board. It was amazing the folks who came together who found out what this young lady's situation was. Brilliant young lady, and she was able to because of her organizing, because of her coming together, because of her advocacy, because of her not wanting generations that followed her to have the same plight. She was able to petition the state to have the state change the curriculum so that everybody had the kind of curriculum that when you graduate from high school, you might be able to attend, 4-year state schools. But because this was an urban situation, because of this poor, low-income immigrants, the expectations was that nobody ever would ever come out of that school and be able to attend a 4-year college. That was one example. Another one is Destiny Wofford. Destiny Wofford was around 19 years old. She was in Baltimore, living in a very low-income community. And Destiny found out that they were getting ready to put this huge incinerator in her neighborhood, one of the largest incinerators in the state. And when she found out about it, she started asking questions of policymakers, asking questions of neighborhoods. The people in the neighborhood they were all elderly people who had just about given up on she said, the people in the neighborhood said, we're a dumping ground. We're used to getting these kinds of things. We're used to this kind of treatment. There's no sense in us fighting. We fought all kinds of provisions and all kinds of laws over the years. We've never really won anything. But Destiny was persistent and engaged a couple of folks from a couple of parishes and churches and organizing and became somewhat of an expert, subject matter expert on incinerators and the kind of emissions that they put out, and fought the state along with some of the very elderly neighbors in our community who also became subject matter experts on the issue. And it became such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful kind of a snowballing effort that they were able to prevent this from happening. It was in any other situation it wouldn't have happened, but they realized this was a low income community, that this community was not going to fight against them, that this community was going to just accept whatever was there. And it was also in the close proximity of a school, elementary school. And she was persistent. She worried us to death. She worried the state person who was deciding them, worried them to death, and was able to get this huge incinerator moved to another place. And I mentioned her because of her tenacity, because her commitment to the neighborhood, the community where she grew up, knowing that it was just a year or two before she was going to go out to college herself, and she was probably not going to come back. But she was dedicated, she was committed, she was caring. She ended up winning the Goldman Award, which is a international award that's given in Sweden for her efforts. And to think that it started with just her hearing or getting a flyer on her door saying that they're going to put this incinerator in the neighborhood, and she just wasn't going to have it anymore. So it was the neighborhood accompanying her, it was the church accompanying her, it was people accompanying her, people who said, that if you 19-year-old Destiny Wofford, if you decide that you're going to do this by yourself, nobody's going to pay you any attention. But we have all the neighborhoods from the community, all the people in the neighborhood in the community. Yeah, we're going to be able to make some difference. When we have persons who were, quite frankly, from other neighborhoods who came over, who said, no, we don't, it's not going in our neighborhood either. And but we care about what happened in this neighborhood, this community. So the whole essence of having accompaniment with her, the essence of having people to walk with her through a very, very difficult time, and her persistence was somewhat contagious to the seniors who lived in the neighborhood. It was so contagious that they, to hear them talk about the emissions, the amount of emissions and those kinds of things was something inspiring for a lot of us to see how far they had come. and how they too, realized that while they were older and not too far from meeting their maker, if you will, they didn't want generations that followed to have to go through what they were going through. The other one is a story that comes to mind. Siyu Jackson. Siyu was she was like 82 or 83 years old in a city in Florida, and she worked in one of the organizing groups, like one that I described. So she had no family, but she was very tenacious to want to make sure that there was no crime, that there was no that the schools were good, and really worked really hard in her community. And she started doing that. Maybe she was like 78 or 79, but she was like at every meeting, very persistent, very dedicated, very, very committed, and and very well loved by the folks who were in the organization with her. She tragically, sadly, she died in a fire. And when she died, the folks who were in the community organizing group with her, they decided that they wanted to find out exactly how, what the dynamics of this fire was. Again, nobody was blood related to her, but they were related to her by the fact that they worked together. They were relational in a very, very different way. So she was able to, in death, do some things that they didn't do in life. So they found out that in investigating the fire, they found out that the water hydrants, the fire hydrants that were near her house, they were dry. Both of them were dry, and they hadn't been charged in years. And it was a situation where the water department thought the fire department charged, and the fire department thought the water department charged, and nobody had inspected them in years and years and years, particularly in that neighborhood. And so the folks who were part of the organization when she was, they insisted and persisted and tried and even got several different laws changed to make sure that there would not be a fire hydrant in that city that wasn't inspected, that wasn't charged, that wasn't ready to go. Did it save lives? Possibly. But it was because of the relationship that Miss Jackson had with the folks who were around in the community organizing group. So I've seen one of the wonderful things about community organizing, particularly faith-based community organizing, is relationships that are formed and are forged that people, they're lifelong. I mean, folks come together, they interact, they have a deeper appreciation for not just their own faith that oftentimes brings them to the table, but they have almost what I would call a natural appreciation for the faith of others, because they're sitting there and they're listening and they're seeing that you're concerned about what happens in our community because of your faith, because of what you believe. And it may be Christianity, it may be Jewish, it may be or no faith at all. But the reason that you're there is because something is driving you. And so to see that in operation, folks were really, 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 really excited about. We had a couple of instances where we would support what we called worker centers. And worker centers were these places where you may have seen, up until recently, sadly, at Home Depot and Lowe's hardware stores, we would see people gathered outside waiting for people to pick them up and take them to work. Well, there were folks who would abuse that by picking people up and taking them and making them work and not paying them, or either agreeing to certain conditions that they never really did. And then at the end of the day, the persons who were working had no recourse because in many cases, they were immigrants. They couldn't report them. So we would support these worker centers where folks would come and they would have a place, instead of being outside the elements in a Home Depot, they would be in a place that could be air conditioned or could be warmed, and they would learn things about their rights. And we would have a person who oftentimes wasn't an immigrant go out and negotiate with the people who were picking them up to find out, what are they going to be doing today? How much are you planning on paying them? You might not be able to they might not be able to report you, but we will. I mean, we'll see that you get that they get paid, or that you get in trouble for not paying. So we've done a great deal of those over the years. Again, just acknowledging and recognizing and listening to what the the immigrants need. A lot of folks, did not know that they were going through the kinds of trauma of not getting paid, of actually, being picked up and taken to other portions of a community and just being dropped off and not, telling them that they were on their own to get back after they worked. Until we sat down and had conversations like, what do you need? What are the kinds of things that you need? And that these folks who are working, these day laborers that are working, they're not doing this for their vacations. I mean, they're not working out there working for their next cruise. They're working so that they might be able to put food on their tables for their families. And for folks to abuse that, the church has a role and has something to say about that. So CCHD will support these organizations and these groups. The other thing, the last group I would mention is another work group, organization in North Carolina called Occupational Threads. And Occupational Threads began as a group of Guatemalan immigrants who were working in a very it was kind of depressed because the industry in this part of North Carolina uh, uh, was furniture, and because of a lot of things, the economy, the changing of the economy, it just went down. So they four people, I think it was, that decided they were going to work in textiles with sewing. And so it started with four people. They built on it and built on it, built on it, built on it. And it's a workaround co-op. And yeah, I can only, I mean, I would encourage you to look at their website because I won't be able to do it credit. I think they're up to like 40 some employees now. And to see how they have taken ownership of this company that they own is tremendous. And to see how it's grown, to see how they've gone to things from just sewing things like t-shirts, they're sewing things from Catholic colleges. I'm not sure if St. John's is one of them, but a lot of organizations that are sending their just things that they want, their t-shirts or any of the kinds of things that they want sewn over there. They're doing these, the quilts that's made out of the t-shirts. I mean, it's just tremendous the kind of work, and they are a time and very respected organization within their community. They've not just the building itself is grown. They've also done some things as it relates to buying parcels for affordable housing for their communities, and they're a part of the community. Now, the beautiful thing is that the community respects and appreciates them to a degree. That they don't ask, immigration status. They know that because they're there, they're contributing. The children are in their schools. They're paying taxes. They're employing folks. And I think the fact that the church, the CCHD, started them out with an economic development loan so many years ago and they will be quick to tell you that had it not been for the church that they wouldn't be able to be where they are today. But it's one of many economic development initiatives that we've been a part of over the years that has thrived, that has allowed people to thrive. So I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions. I mean, I can go on and on and on and on, but and as I mentioned, I got tons of stories, and people accuse me of talking too fast, but I say they listen too slow. So if there's something I said that didn't land correctly, please give me another opportunity to say it correctly. So if there's any questions or comments, as I mentioned earlier, I grow from having an opportunity to listen to young people. It's rare that I have this pleasure, this opportunity, way too rare. So I want to seize the opportunity in the moment to hear your thoughts as well.
Thank you so much, Ralph. So to get us started, we have three wonderful St. John's students who are going to start the conversation. And to everybody else who is logged on, again, put any questions, thoughts, responses you have in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. And so we begin with Martina.
Hello, everyone. It's truly an honor to be here and amongst all of you, all well-spoken and well-accomplished people. My name is Martina De Buglio. I'm a psychology major at St. John's. I also minor in anthropology, so they're both in St. John's Liberal Arts and Sciences. And a question that it's been begging in the back of my mind like the whole time you've been speaking are what are some ways we unknowingly keep the impoverished community in poverty or unheard? Because I know we have a lot of like implicit biases and just overall having a tendency to turn a blind eye to things. And there's a lot of times when we don't know that we're doing something that could keep people in the spot that we want to get them out of.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think you're absolutely right that oftentimes it's we we fall prey to our biases, but I think oftentimes too with so much going on around us that oftentimes we become numb or blind or with everything that's going on around us. We don't see, we don't see the railroad tracks to go across. We don't see the other part of the country, and then we'll hear about there being a war in Gaza or something, and we switch to another channel because the pain is just too difficult to hear about, people starving and things like that. I think that Pope Francis and now Pope Leo both talk a lot about the whole essence of solidarity. And I always encourage folks, no matter, who I'm talking to is, to ask themselves as a part of their daily prayer, who am I in solidarity with? And who is missing from my solidarity? Am I in solidarity only with people who are successful, only with people who are not struggling? Remind yourself that there are folks who are struggling, who are in difficulty, and you don't have to go through. I mean, are we in solidarity with the persons who are immigrants, who are children, who are being zip tied and disappeared? Are we in solidarity with the folks who in the next few days are going to struggle with their SNAP benefits, their food benefits being taken away? Are we in solidarity with the person in the food banks who are trying to do that? Are we in solidarity with persons who are going to sleep every night in Ukraine because they can't sleep because of the bombs that are going on? So, and to say that to not fall prey to the what's obvious, what's easy, the comfort zones that we often find ourselves place ourselves in because it's easy and it's comfortable. In my church back in DC, we have a sign on that, and we don't have an exit sign in the church. I guess it may be even violating some law, but we don't have an exit sign. It says service entrance. That we come to be comfortable, enjoy one another, worship God, pray, but we go out into a world to be of service. We go out this place to be a servant. So we're going into a world that needs us, that's begging for our assistance, and to realize that there's struggle. That's not necessarily that you have to live a life of all gloom and doom, because for me, I think the whole idea of knowing that there's so much struggle out there, it offers me hope, because I do see folks who are able to overcome some of the struggles, who are able to overcome some of the difficulties, and knowing that opportunity is there for me to try to assist in some way or the other, provides a sense of hope.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful answer. I definitely agree with your points about uncomfortableness and how the conversation ends as soon as someone becomes uncomfortable. It is a lot of heavy topics going on, and even when I try speaking with my family or some people who are not really ready to hear all of it or just talk about it, because a lot of us know that there's not much that we can do in certain situations, and it just ends when it just gets too much. So I definitely
Yeah,
agree on that.
I agree.
Alina, in this, bring you in on this first round of discussion.
Hi, my name is Alina. Again, it was really, really nice to actually listen to your
Alina, I
story.
can just barely hear you. I'm old.
Can you hear me now better?
Better, yes, I am.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Again, Thank you so much for these amazing stories. I found them very personal and emotional as you were talking about different communities and stories behind them. I'm a senior majoring in data analytics, but I have a minor in social justice.
Oh, wonderful.
Muslim scholar, so I do a lot of community service. So, reflecting on community gathering is a big thing. So, as you were telling me those stories, I kind of tried to reflect more on what happens after the advocacy comes in. So, my question will be more about, like, in your experience, what happens when this advocacy to marginalized community becomes a form of mutual conversion. So not when only like the marginalized community are transformed, but also us, those who are trying to accompany them. What happens after? That's like kind of.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned the whole essence of mutual conversion in that and I think that's one of the gifts that CCHD had is that you know the whole idea of going and listening and not telling folks what it is that they need. But I'm reminded of it's a small example, but I think it's significant nonetheless. But there was a very a couple back in Texas who were very I'm just going to say sanctimoniously pious. I mean, they went to mass every day, uh, and then they did their 30 and 45 minutes every day, and then they did an hour and 10 minutes on. And then that's where their faith ended. It ended completely there, and and they would tell you that you know that you know my husband and I are very holy people because that's what we do, and you know and it wasn't until I challenged them to say, well, you know, would you mind joining this group that I hadn't been a part of yet, but they were just forming. And one of the projects that the group had was they were trying to get an extra bus stop in their neighborhood. And you know, and it sounded trite, sounded trivial, but the it meant for the people in the neighborhood, it meant an hour less of a commute every day. And so when they heard about it and when they understood, well, yeah, that makes sense. That's reasonable. So they were like right there with the group as they came together, and I'll just say they were different race and ethnicity, but they were right there with, and they were like some of the most powerful stars. That would, you know, that makes sense. You know, why would you want to be an hour away from your kids and families? I mean, 2 hours away from your kids and families every day, and something we take for granted, you know that. And so they were stunned, and you know, and it that particular, I mean, it changed their lives, and they ended up moving to Florida, and they're just you know, wonderful advocates, and the kind of work that they're doing now is completely different in the way that they practice their faith. And it was just that entree, you know, just getting in through that one little door to realize that there's a difficulty and suffering. And you know, and for me, you know, I would think, you know, the bus stop thing was like a small thing when you compare it to some of the other things, but for them, I would have never thought that would have been a major undertaking for them, and that would be the thing that would shift them to another type of ministry that was just totally intense and stronger and asking hard questions of some of the policymakers there in Florida. And this was 25 years ago, and I still hear from them several times a year, and they're proud of, and I'm proud of some of the things they're doing. But it's that one little incident, one little entree that allowed them to shift their way of thinking in a way that they can live their faith in a different way.
Thank you. That's a wonderful example. I find it very emotional how like a tiny little help, a tiny little support can change people's life and lead them to do something greater.
And it's even relational. They even keep in touch with some of the people that were on the that were looking for that were on the bus line that were trying to get the extra bus stop, and they live in another state now. So it's and they'll call the name. I talked to so and so. I thought I don't remember who so and so was. But thank you for your question, Alina.
Siri.
Hi, Mr. McCloud. Thank you so much for being here, and everyone. It's an honor to be here. My name is Siri. I am a graduate student for clinical mental health counseling and a graduate assistant at the Vincentian Impact Office. So I'm very happy to be able to talk to you because throughout my studies, I've also been doing a lot of community work, especially with low income in terms of mental health. So I wanted to ask you the question kind of about how do you think we could promote this inclusivity? You mentioned a lot of good examples about, the girl that's very young and then the older people, but how do you feel like individuals with very different struggles in terms of race, immigration status, faith, as well as mental health, when we help them individually, what do you think would be the good step to include that, promote that inclusivity, and also advocate for this systematic change?
I think it's an important exercise to always ask whenever you're gathering, even on Sunday mornings, whenever there's a gathering, to ask who's missing, who's not at the table, who is, and to the degree that there are persons who are missing, then we're not whole, we're not complete. If there are persons who have disabilities who aren't there, if there are persons of different ethnicities who aren't there, if there are low income people who aren't there, to the degree people are missing, we're not whole. We're not a whole community. And I think that making deliberate efforts to not just seek them out, but look for ways to make them comfortable, to make them welcome, to realize that they have something to bring to the conversation. One of the proudest organizations that we support over the years was one down in Houston that the state of Texas, in their wisdom, decided that they were not going to support any of the medical supplies that they were going to need for this disabled group they all had spinal injuries, and so you pretty much own your own for any kind of wheelchairs and even things like diapers. And so they would not support them. And they came together, like 40 of them now. And they came together in their wheelchairs and they were able to, secure things like curb cuts, other benefits and let the state know. But it was someone that it was a group that was considered, they were silent, they were isolated. But then after someone let them in, if you will, then all of a sudden they got courage. They were bold. Their numbers grew, and their courage was such that even though, and these I may mention too, they were all immigrants. On top of the reason they didn't get the benefits because they were immigrants. That it made the state kind of change their mind and kind of a hard policy making state that was hell bent on teaching immigrants a lesson. Once they saw that these folks are struggling with spinal injuries, in wheelchairs, and in some ways in the hospital, and these are things they need. I mean, the policymakers, let me just be human then. Let me just be human. But absent that encounter, if you will, absent that opportunity to I won't even say walk with, because most of them couldn't walk, but to accompany them, it was it opened a lot of doors. But I would say, and I think Catholics have to work at this a whole lot more than others in terms of being deliberately, intentionally inclusive, and that you have to go outside of your community oftentimes to ask who's not here, whose perspective is not at this table right now, and to the degree we don't have that perspective, we're missing something.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate what you talked about the whole time about community organizing and the idea that charity itself is not enough. We need so much more for this systematic change. And especially when you were talking, I really like that you said that a lot of the board members are also low income, so they really can empathetically help with the community. Throughout my internship, I help with people with schizophrenia and psychosis out in the Bronx. So a lot of them are very low income and people who has been in the hospital or incarcerated. So I definitely see how kind of opening up the door and asking who's not here at the table really change their situation, their mindset to open that door for more amazing future opportunities. So I have another question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so obviously wonderful to be here. I want to ask, what is one thing that you think us as listeners to be here at the panel that we could take with us to advocate or live out this intentional support after today, or at least in our daily lives?
I would say there's an old saying, and it's kind of timely now, but about having having the Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other. I'm not even sure where it came from, but knowing what's happening in the world and knowing that as a faith community that you that there is that you have a response, that there is a need for you to respond some way or the other. And some days it won't be anything, but you won't be able to do anything but pray. And pray is powerful. I certainly agree that. But there's some days that you have to like uh, wallow in your discomfort so much that it makes you do something else. So I think the whole idea of asking, like, who am I in solidarity with? Who's struggling today? Um, who can I and who can I help in just any small way? And to know that there is that kind of pain and suffering that's that's redeeming for me. That's helps me towards my salvation. It helps me practice my faith in a deeper way. Um, so I think that just asking yourself that question: who am I in solidarity with? Who's missing from my circle? Who can I offer a kind word or even just a smile to today that's struggling? Who am I blaming for their own plight? Uh, who am I? This nun I used to work with, she always took, and I didn't like it at the time, but she used to always take the path towards. I mean, we would go to church and back. She would go through the homeless shelters, and she would like see the homeless people who would come on the street. She would always go that way, even though the different routes, and it always added like maybe a half an hour to our commute. But she wanted to get. She would go, and she would have granola bars in her car, and she would give out the granola bars to folks. And she would say, that either one or two things happen. Either they're going to be hungry enough, and they really are hungry to eat the granola bars, or they're going to throw it away, and the birds will have something to eat. So, but she was committed. She was going to do something in a very, very small way. But to know that you can do something, to know that you have an opportunity to do something, and to look for ways that you might have over the years just kind of victimize folk for whatever the reason. That in some cases it can be human nature. Some ways it can be because you were influenced by the media or policymakers or folks to tell you that you should feel a certain way about certain people. It's just, and see, you're not going there anymore. Good question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We still have a few minutes, and so I want to encourage those who have joined us and are watching the webinar, please put in the chat if you have a question or something you'd like to raise. I will ask if any of the three students have another question, but first, as a moderator's privilege, it seems like the kind of looking at an ethics of humility is a necessary starting point for both advocacy and accompaniment. And I'm wondering, first Ralph, but then also our, Martina, Alina, and Siri, you're all engaged in various forms of community service and advocacy and investigating, right, the underlying causes of poverty and exclusion in anthropology classes and whatnot. I know for me, when I was the student's age, and I was teaching first grade CCD as a community service project in the Bronx. And I remember listening to the people who were in charge of the program complaining about how the students were constantly late and all of this. And I remember being 19 years old and thinking, I don't remember it being this hard to learn the Our Father. As right as I'm trying and thinking, kind of, it's hard to learn something in 1 hour a week. And what I came to realize is that these parents were working at times between the two of them, 3, 4 jobs trying to make ends meet. Um, in order. And so the amount of effort it took for them to actually get their kid there for 1 hour a week was a massive sign of what they thought was important.
Mhm.
But from the perspective of privilege, right? Those who didn't have to struggle, it was, well, they can't even get them here on time for 1 hour a week. And so, right, so you had to kind of step outside of your privilege and with humility try and think about what is it that these children and parents are carrying to then be able to be an effective teacher for them. And for me, it was a real eye-opening lesson in how different my own experience, right, and sort of deconstructing my own privilege on something as simple as learning the Our Father as a 7-year-old. And so I'm wondering for each of you, right, what is it something that when you started to engage on matters of poverty and injustice that you through experience learned, okay, I have to unlearn some things and I have to learn some humility and I don't know what I thought I knew. So I'll start with Ralph.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a tough question. I think that to be constantly asking yourselves why does this situation exist, and not being content with it having to be that way. I mean, one of the things with this with CCHD is we acknowledge we want to look at the root causes of poverty. What are the reasons why this particular uh, situation finds or persons find themselves in poverty, and that it's not 100% of the times that we've looked into it. Nobody wants to be there. Nobody wants to be in poverty. Nobody thrives on being in poverty. But but asking the hard question, like, could it be something, like a good example, and I was appreciating the question earlier, but we oftentimes will take the simple and the easy answer to situations like in mass incarceration. We would say, mass incarceration people, why we have to have so much mass incarceration because people are bad. And not saying, there's so many other things that associated with. I mean, to say that there is crime, that there is, drug addiction, that there is domestic violence, that there is persons who were abused as children, that there is, it's asking the why means that, you're not easily pigeonhole something into a one answer. It's like looking at something like homelessness and say, people are homeless because, and I've heard, way too many times, people are homeless because they don't want to be housed. Well, who doesn't want to be housed? Or that they don't want, or they don't want to work. And who doesn't? And folks are convenient with that. I mean, they'll rest with that simple, easy answer to allow them to do that. And I think, another very quick story is there was a situation in Southern California too, where we were working with Special Olympics, and the guy told me, he said, that a person that agreed to write a $300,000 check to Special Olympics only if in the market in the television market where he lived, that there would be no more Special Olympics commercials because he just could not stand to watch them. It was driving him to be someone he said he didn't want to be. But and fortunately the Special Olympics organization said no, we're not, keep your money. We're going to keep informing the community. We want the community to know. We want the community to feel. We want the community to have some sort of proximity to persons who have disabilities that they would not have had it not been with these things. So I think, that they probably raised a whole lot more than the $300,000. But, I think that there is that notion if we can just remove the pain from us, remove the suffering from our psyche, that it would go away, or that it's not there anymore. So I think that we we never turned the money down at CCHD, that's for sure, and we still kept telling the stories. But the idea of being able to inoculate ourselves in a way that we won't feel or see pain, I don't think it's healthy.
There's one organization that, as you were talking, that is a CCHD funded group in in Brooklyn, Queens, in the Diocese of Brooklyn and Queens, called Sure We Can. And I recommend everybody take a look at it. And it's a similar, and it is a collective, cooperative of canners, recyclers. So people who go around collecting cans and recycling throughout the city. And it can be made this is how they make their living. And they have managed to purchase the land in which they are on and expanding. And so there's a stability in which they're able to operate and able to then organize. And they've currently been bringing in more and more community groups with them in terms of raising the amount of the deposit on glass, because of not just how much more glass costs, but also that collecting glass and recycling glass is a little bit more dangerous of a thing than just aluminum cans. And so organizing not just themselves, but kind of participating in these wider ecological state organizing in order to get policy changes. And for the St. John students, that's a local group that sometimes classes go and visit here in our diocese that gets its organization, gets grants from Catholic Campaign for Human Development. And I interviewed one of their leaders once, and she turned as part of another theology project, and she said to me, and she's an immigrant from Mexico, who's been in New York for decades, and she said, "Who would clean up the streets if we were not here? We are cleaning up the community." And this sense of, right, that oftentimes the people that we easily overlook, we don't see as partners, right? We only see their pain and their deprivation, right? Have a strong sense of it, right? And of agency, and they know the ways in which they are contributing to the common good. It's the rest of us who need help in recognizing it. If there was one thing, Ralph, as we end, that you would say, and this came up in the chat from Olivia, one thing where how would you suggest students take that first step to learn about what local advocacy is going on in their community, so that they can know in order to join with people who are, for example, fighting for a new bus stop?
I would say do one or two things: to look at their own local communities to see, what's happening in their community. But I would say too that for many of us, our communities are just fine. Things are just wonderful. So we might have to go a community over, or two communities over, or three communities over, to see the difficulty. I think the biggest thing I would say is to be aware that there's something bigger and not necessarily better than what your experiences are. That you look for ways to go to as Pope Francis would say, to the peripheries, to the margins. I'm not saying that you should put yourself in any kind of danger. I'm just saying that you look for ways to identify and embrace someone else's pain and let them see your humanity. I think that would be what I would offer. This was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all. Thank you all. I appreciate it. And please, don't hesitate to call and share with me some of your stories at some point. Or questions or comments. I'm excited about, the fact that some 35 people or whatever, several people came and took the time to be with us this afternoon uh, to listen, but to share. But just know this is a very, very small portion of what needs to be done. And so much of it is in your hands. So thank you, and may God continue to bless each of you.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you to Martina, Siri, and Alina, and to everyone who was on. It's hard to think of a better way than that to end. Everybody have a wonderful afternoon.